The American Simmental Association recently released the Heifer Pregnancy EPD in May of 2026. The Heifer Pregnancy EPD predicts differences among individuals in the percentage of their daughters that become pregnant during their first breeding season as heifers. As with any EPD, it's important to remember that an EPD predicts differences in progeny performance. Therefore, a heifer pregnancy EPD doesn't represent the likelihood that the individual herself will become pregnant, but rather the heifer preg EPD predicts differences among individuals, typically sires, and their percentage of daughters that become pregnant as heifers. In other words, it's reported as the percentage of daughters expected to conceive and subsequently calve at 2 years of age. The American Simmental Association is excited to release this Heifer Preg EPD because it's an economically relevant trait, or an ERT. One of those reasons is that open heifers are a financial investment without producing a calf to generate a return. Those costs can be partially offset by the salvage value returned when you sell that open heifer. However, having open heifers around is certainly not an ideal situation. Research suggests that females must remain in the herd until about 5 to 7 years of age, producing a calf each year before recovering those development costs that are associated with developing that heifer and maintaining her. And so reproductive success is vitally important. Reproductive success has a long-term impact on your cow herd. It plays a major role in the lifetime productivity and profitability of your cow herd. And it's particularly important trait as the industry discusses future herd expansion, identifying those productive females as the industry continues discussions about rebuilding the nation's cow herd is important, and the Heifer Preg EPD gives members a tool to help identify those females to retain. Let's now look at how we can use the Heifer Preg EPD or interpret it. And we can do so by considering the following example. Consider that we have two bulls. Bull A has a Heifer Preg EPD of 10, and Bull B has a Heifer Preg EPD of 5. If each of those bulls produced 100 heifer daughters, and all other factors were held equal, you'd expect an average of 5 more daughters to become pregnant as heifers from Bull A compared to Bull B. So that would be 5%, or 5 out of 100 daughters, translating to pregnancy rates of 92 out of 100 versus 87 out of 100, or a 5% difference. And those pregnancy rates were chosen just as an example to display that difference. Your exact pregnancy rate outcomes will depend on your individual operation. But because reproductive success is a major driver of profitability, even these modest differences in heifer pregnancy can add up over time to measurable economic differences in your cow herd. And because it's a new EPD, it can take a while to wrap our minds around the scale or maybe the scope of that EPD. And so I recommend looking at the percentile rankings. This can help you understand how an animal's heifer preg EPD compares to the rest of the population. Percentile rankings will range from 1 to 99%, and for heifer pregnancy, larger values are more favorable. Larger values indicate a higher percentage of daughters becoming pregnant as heifers, and so those will be the ones that have percentile rankings more towards 1%. And animals that you should consider as selection candidates if heifer pregnancy is part of your breeding objective. The heifer pregnancy phenotypes are generated from the Total Herd Enrollment, or THE program. THE is a comprehensive dam inventory program designed to facilitate complete data reporting of contemporary groups. And so only exposed heifers will be assigned a heifer pregnancy phenotype and enter the heifer pregnancy genetic evaluation. Heifers not exposed don't receive the phenotype for heifer preg. they don't enter the heifer preg genetic evaluation or impact your contemporary groups of heifers that were exposed. So a heifer's phenotype is either a success or failure of becoming pregnant over an entire breeding season. Currently, the Heifer Preg EPD definition doesn't account for which cycle she became pregnant in, so whether that's the first or second or so on. But she receives a successful Heifer Preg phenotype if she conceived during the entire season. Because the Heifer Preg phenotypes are generated from the THE program, proper dam enrollment and correct use of THE productivity and removal codes is essential for accurate phenotyping of Heifer Preg. Now, a few tips for THE and particularly regarding Heifer Preg. Use the pre and post weaning calf removal codes prior to THE enrollment. So if there are calves that you removed either pre or post weaning, enter in a removal code prior to starting your THE enrollment job, and then those animals won't populate in your preliminary inventory. You should assign a removal or productivity code that best explains the reality or what actually happened. There may not be a code for every specific scenario, so just pick the one that is closest to explaining the true reason. If you have any questions about a specific scenario, just reach out to me. And if possible, collect the required data on deceased calves carried to their full term. It is better to give that dam credit for calving than to use a productivity code and say that she never calved at all. And then, if you're not already, consider becoming a THE herd. Only heifers that are enrolled through THE or part of a THE herd receive a Heifer Preg phenotype, so this may be another reason or benefit to join the THE program. Now, there is a common misconception or myth that it's not possible to make genetic progress on a low heritability trait, but that's not true. It is, particularly using genetic selection tools like EPDs and indexes in combination with sound management practices on the farm. Now, EPDs are especially important for female reproductive traits. This is for several reasons. The traits not observed later in life, so for example, heifer pregnancy can't be observed till 2 years of age, in comparison with a trait like birth weight, which happens much earlier in life. The trait is sex limited, can't be directly observed in males, and the trait has a low heritability. For all of these reasons, phenotypic selection alone, it results in much slower progress. The observable phenotypic differences that you see in Heifer Preg are mostly due to environment rather than genetics. That is the definition of low heritability. The heritability of heifer pregnancy is about 0.09, and that makes the differences that you see much more difficult to actually see them or observe them, and that is what makes phenotypic selection less accurate and further emphasizes the need or to use a genetic selection tool like an EPD. For more information about the Heifer Pregnancy EPD, you can visit the ASA website at the Breeder Resources New EPD Updates tab. This is the home for all of the information regarding new EPDs, updates to the genetic evaluation, as well as future developments to the evaluation. So I'd encourage you to check out this website tab if you haven't already. And thanks for watching. If you have any questions, please reach out directly to me, Dr. Elizabeth Dressler, the lead geneticist with ASA, at my email address below. Thank you.